Hello, and welcome back to Friday Vinyl Club, where every day feels like a Friday and every album tells a story. I'm Jamie, and each episode I invite a guest to bring along one special record, an album that didn't just play in their lives, but shaped it. This isn't about chart positions or critical reviews, it's about personal soundtracks, the records that stayed with us long after the needle lifts. This episode, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Sam Wiles, podcast producer, audio storyteller, and the voice behind Paul or Nothing, the world's biggest Paul McCartney podcast. His work spans long-form interviews, rigorous research, and beautifully crafted audio storytelling, all delivered with a mix of humour, curiosity, and deep musical insight. We'll talk about the podcast a little later, but first, as a curveball, Sam's Friday Vinyl Club pick is Swordfish Trombones by Tom Waits. Released in 1983, this album marked a radical shift in Waits' sound. Jagged, experimental, percussive, and unlike anything he'd released before. It was the start of a whole new chapter, not just for Waits, but for anyone following him closely. But before we dive into the album and Sam's connection with it, let's rewind a little. Sam, welcome to the Friday Vinyl Club. How are you feeling today?
Yo, what's going on, Jamie? Thank you so much for having me on. This is really exciting. I've been looking to get on more non-Beatles sphere podcasts in 2026, and I saw your show on Instagram when our mutual friend Vinyl Benji came on, and so I was instantly filled with green envy, and so I had to come on just to one up him, you know. So I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you're on too, and having a fellow podcaster on is always a great thing. So I'm looking forward to learning a few things today, especially with the album that you've chosen. It's a little bit of a curveball. So let's deal with the elephant in the room. You have the world's biggest Paul McCartney dedicated podcast. So I kind of half expected you to have a Beatles or a Paul McCartney album for Friday Vinyl Club, but you've gone with Tom Waits. What's the background there?
Well, there's a multi-layered answer here, but I'm going to try and make it as succinct as I can. Number one, my podfather, a guy named Morris, who runs the Love That Album podcast, a brilliant show that's been going on even longer than Paul or Nothing has, maybe spanning several decades now. When I was going to guest on his show, finally, his main condition was that I was not allowed to pick a Beatle album. I wasn't actually allowed to pick a Waits album either, but I didn't have that restriction here. So whenever I go and talk about music on other shows, I do like to kind of step out of my own wheelhouse a little bit, dip into other topics. I am very hyper-focused and neurospicy in my interests. So, you know, there's like only a few bands that I really know well, and Waits is one of them. Though, to pull back the curtain even further, your research may not have shown that I was also the co-founder and co-creator, co-host of the world's first Tom Waits podcast, which was called Down in the Hole. That went on for about 3 years. Me and the host, my friend Tom, we had our own kind of Beatles, Lennon and McCartney split in our own right. He went on to talk about Metallica and battle rap, and I wanted to cover the Beatles, but I thought that was a bit arrogant and a bit overly ambitious for my first solo outing. I didn't want to cover any of the other three, and so Paul was the one that was naturally left, and I've been covering him ever since, really. But yeah, when I saw that this show was on the horizon, and especially since that Vinyl Benji had done a Beatles album as well, I thought, no, I best stick to my guns here and at least not do a Beatle one. Though recently I have been getting back into Tom Waits. I have a little project with him that I have on the horizon that I will tell you about once we've stopped recording. So I thought, yeah, it's time to revisit the classic Franks trilogy, and where better to start than with the beginning of the quote-unquote Franks trilogy, which is 1983's Swordfish Trombone. But obviously we're going to get into that album a little bit later, aren't we?
We are indeed, and you can just tell me exactly what I've stepped into when you've introduced me to this album, because I have to say, first listen was interesting. It's taken me a few further listens to try and get my head around it. So I'll be prodding you and poking you for some insight around this album. But where I usually like to start is early music memories, Sam. So going back, what's your earliest musical memory that's kind of stayed with you? Like, what did music sound like in your house growing up?
Well, my earliest individual music memory, I think, goes back to year four, which would be like either the third or fourth grade for you American listeners out there. And my teacher, Mr. Rook, he brought in his guitar one day and he sang Yellow Submarine, and we all learned how to sing Yellow Submarine. And pretty much from then onwards, my Beatle love was born, leading to my show now. But, until I met the guy I did the Tom Waits podcast with, I really didn't know what listening to music was. He really did, he was one of those really formative friends that I needed at that age to kind of introduce me to, like, an album is arranged in a certain way. It's not just a random collection of songs. Like, it took me till I was 17 to learn that. It really blew my mind. Like, when I was growing up, I mostly just had like MTV or Kerrang or Scuzz on the music channels, and I'd just watch music videos. Music videos were the main source that I got music as a kid. And it wasn't until I was 17 and I got my very first iPod. It was an iPod Nano original. That's how old I am. And from that point onwards, that's when I discovered albums and so many artists. Most of them kind of fell by the wayside and are just kind of ancillary parts of my love of music. But in that very fertile gap, that is when I discovered the Beatles. That's when I discovered Tom Waits. And my other great love, which probably won't appeal to many of your fans, the great Kanye West, who has obviously fallen from grace since.
Yeah. Well, we won't touch on Kanye West too much, I don't think, today. What were your parents listening to when you were growing up around the house? Did they have a vinyl record collection, or would it be CDs or cassettes?
So I did inherit a couple of vinyl from my father. I did have his copy of Sergeant Pepper that he stole from his neighbour. Band on the Run, Wings Greatest, all very formative albums for me. I remember my dad would always have Stevie Wonder on. We'd always listen to Stevie Wonder when we went on a holiday in Spain. We'd like drive around the Spanish countryside. We'd always have songs in the key of life on, or that big 3-disc box set that came out in the early 2000s. But Jamiroquai was a big act in our house growing up. That was the very first gig I ever saw at the Utilita Arena here in Birmingham, UK. Mum, the earliest memories I have of Mum, like, she has these phases where she'll buy like 6 CDs, listen to them for 4 years, and then not listen to music for like another 3. And then buy another like 10 CDs and just be obsessed with them. It's a wonderful cycle. There's a bit of a Harry Styles fad at the moment with her. But as a kid, I remember she had Maroon 5's debut album, Songs About Jane. She had, and Destiny's Child's second and third album. Those were on constant rotation in the house. 100%.
So it sounds like the house was very much CD based, and you've talked about your dad had a couple of vinyl records. Do you remember when you first started getting your own collection of vinyl?
I remember that I started collecting vinyl in that wonderful little window just before the modern 2010s vinyl boom, end of secondary school, start of uni, college. I remember buying, it was at Swordfish Records, ironically. This isn't bullshit. It was at Swordfish Records here in Birmingham, UK. And there's a wonderful man who works there. Very stereotypical vinyl guy. Like, if you had to draw a vinyl guy for a Tim Burton movie, that's who he is. He's a very evocative person. And I bought Magical Mystery Tour for £2.50 in the 2010s. It's not like, oh, I bought it for £2.50 in the 70s. No, I bought it for £2.50 in like 2012 or something like that. And I remember saying, why is this so cheap? And the man behind the counter went, because no one wants this album. Like, no one likes this album. Vinyl's not very big right now. It's not in. Yeah. Like, none of this is expensive. And then I felt like I blinked and double winked. I think that's a little Mary Poppins reference there. And suddenly vinyl was now £30 or $50 an album. No one consulted me. It's just the way it happened, I guess.
Yeah, there was that real dip, wasn't there, where vinyl was just kind of like limited presses that were being created, and then suddenly it became mainstream again. So did you have your own vinyl turntable at that point? Where are you? Are you at uni there?
No, I definitely had my first turntable at home. The very first one was a complete failure because it was a turntable designed to turn your parents' vinyl into MP3 files. So like you had to get a separate speaker for it, and it was this real hodgepodge Frankenstein machine to get that to emit any actual sound. But my second vinyl player just before university, that was a wonderful Christmas present that I got off my parents, along with a couple of decent albums as well. That's when I got Rubber Soul. That's when I got Revolver. And I was starting to branch out a little and buy other people's records. I remember around that time I got Crystal Castles 2 by Crystal Castles for some reason. I don't know why I'd ever listened to that. I was just drawn to it. That's when I started listening to Waits as well on vinyl. His discography has been quite hard to get, actually. You know how you'll have like an act like Weird Al, where he'll have one vinyl pressing in like 1987, and then it's just straight to CD. There was no reprint, and Waits has a lot of that. So, the closer you get to the 90s, that late 80s stuff, some of it is so rare. I mean, I'm just looking at my copy of Rain Dogs now, the sequel to Swordfish Trombones, Part 2 in the Franks trilogy. I only got this a couple of years ago, and it was for an exorbitant amount of money for what is a very cheaply made quick print album for an artist that Island Records had faith in, but he wasn't their biggest earner or anything. But yeah, I've got a lovely little player now. It's got all the Bluetooth mod cons and stuff. A lot of vinyl players now are so good that you don't even need to put the vinyl in them anymore. You just hook up your phone to it and just play whatever you want, which isn't how you're supposed to do it, but it's kind of how I do it now.
It's not, but to be fair, my son Ollie moved out and we got him his first turntable, and that's got Bluetooth enabled as well. So I think, nowadays you've got the best of both worlds for the generation that's now starting to get into vinyl records, really, haven't you?
It's important that you do show people physically that there is a difference with vinyl. I know it sounds pretentious, and I know it sounds like I'm Jack Black and John Cusack in High Fidelity, but when you put on a vinyl, you do get a different sound that you don't get from listening to an MP3 file. The fact that there's a physical reaction happening in front of you to create those sound waves and the dynamics that they can create with the space in your living room or in your bedroom or wherever. There is nothing like it. When I got the Revolver anniversary super deluxe set that came out a couple of years ago, that's when I got my very first mono record. I'd never listened to a mono record before. Mono to me was just one of those things that audiophiles spend far too much time talking about and never explaining. And then I put my first physical vinyl mono record on, and it was the closest experience I have ever had to listening to the Beatles for the very first time again. It was almost a religious, transcendent moment.
Yeah, that speaks exactly to what we try and talk about on the Friday Vinyl Club. You've already touched on the sequencing, the side A, the side B. We talk about intentional listening. Ollie went through a stage, iPod generation, where he was just swiping from song to artist to song. He'd pick out sort of different tracks that he'd like, but he couldn't sit there and say, I've listened to the full album. But getting him in the vinyl den and introducing him to the concept of, here's the album, you've got the artwork in your hand, you've got a physical something to actually attach the sound to, and then teaching him how to use the turntable, when to flip, how to use the tone arm, etc. He really, really loves it now. So, from our perspective, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's just so much the kids today will be missing out on. God, I sound old already. I'm only in my early 30s. But yeah, what I like so much about vinyl, and this will apply to anyone who thinks they may have ADHD or not, or just has a low attention span in general. I love the fact that a vinyl record kind of takes away my agency and my power a little bit. Like, it's such a faff and a ball ache to pick a particular song you want. Like, you've really got to squint and kind of like get up and move over to it. So the idea that you just put on this album and you are at the behest, you are at the whim of the artist, the artiste, as it were, and you go down that journey of you listen to this song and then you listen to that song, and that song is informed by the previous one and will inform the next one. That journey cannot be replicated by creating your own playlist on Spotify. It just can't. And the idea that you can skip a song or even click pause at the press of a very convenient button, it's almost too much power. You know, like when Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park's like, yeah, you were thinking about whether or not you could. You didn't stop to think whether you should. You know,
Good.
it
Yeah.
does feel like that.
No, I'm totally with you. You know, the artist, the singer, songwriter, or the band that's put that album together, they've deliberately put a lot of thought in the sequencing, as you say, how the tracks lay, how they inform each other. So I think it's really, you know, you can't always do it. You have to invest time. You have to give yourself over, as you say. But I think, you know, through this podcast, we sort of encourage that intentional listening. It sounds like when you started buying albums, Sam, you were straight into Beatles. Was that sort of like, did you have an intentional, I've got to get the Beatles back catalogue, or was it they just happened to come along? As you say, you found a £2.50 copy of Magical Mystery Tour. Did they just sort of fall in like that? Or were you going after other bands? Did you kind of fall into a particular scene or a particular era?
So, fortunately, my father's now passed, so I can't libel him anymore. I don't have to say it allegedly. My dad was big into. Do you remember LimeWire back in the day?
I vaguely remember it.
So, folks, LimeWire was rather like Napster, was an illegal file sharing platform in the early 2000s. And it was a real Wild West. You know, you type in something and you might get something completely wrong, or the person who uploaded it might be ill-informed. And so my dad's original iPod like brick was this treasure trove of like mislabeled songs. It was a real like adventure. But I remember, like, after a while, I did feel guilty that I hadn't actually given the Beatles any monetary remunerance for the pleasure that they'd given me. I know that sounds really lame to say, but I was like, God, I really should give Paul McCartney some money here, just for the amount of joy that he's given me. Like, you know, since, you know, I've gone on to buy tickets and merch and physically buy a lot of vinyls on release day and pre-order them, T-shirts, blah, blah, blah. But back then I did feel like, you know what? I have gotten such a kick from these four young lads from Liverpool that I genuinely don't mind reimbursing them for it. There are so many artists that I wouldn't do that for, mostly because I haven't completed their discographies. I don't know them that deeply. But like, once you get through an artist's entire discography, especially a particularly lengthy one, and you've gone on that journey many, many times, not only do you, you know, want to be a part of that by maybe thanking them financially or whatever, but it's nice to have the physical totem. Like, just having the albums here with you is just so warm and reassuring. You know that film The Postman, or like The Book of Eli, where there's someone in the post-apocalyptic future holding on to these old tomes of knowledge from the past? Like, I do have a little like solace knowing that if there is a thermonuclear event that does wipe out most of life on this planet as we know it, all I have to do is get a little needle and a vibrating crystal and find the ability to rotate a vinyl record at 33 1/3 rotations per minute, and I still have all of this music left. You know, the EMP, it's wiped out the internet, all those CDs are now useless, electronics are gone, but the vinyl remains forever. That's just endlessly fascinating to me, and I'm glad I've got my stockpile here. I will guard it with my life. This needs to be kept for the future, 100%.
So the Beatles, the cornerstone of so many people's musical soundscape. So what was it that drew you to the Beatles when you're growing up and listening? Obviously, you had that interaction with Mr. Rook, your teacher, relatively early on. But what was it? Was it the individualness of them? Was it the group together? Was it the sound? What?
I just never experienced an artist where every track like that was just a hit. Like, It was almost a joke by the end. Like, okay, it can't keep getting better, can it? They can't still. Oh no, they still are. Yeah. The magic that they delivered, the consistency of it. I enjoy them more on a kind of like a stat level, like top trumps. If the Beatles were in band top trumps, all of their stats would be 10 out of 10. It would be the best card to play every time, unless like one of the stats was drummer's songwriting ability. Okay, Neil Peart might win, or Phil Collins or something. Fair enough. But like, there's just no element of the Beatles that isn't brilliant or isn't at least interesting to talk about. And as someone who likes to become really obsessed, like as a young child, there wasn't a dinosaur that I couldn't name and point out and draw with my eyes closed or whatever. And so I've always liked to get deep into whatever I'm into. Be it a nerdy tabletop board game that I play, or a video game, or a director's filmography. I do like to fully explore an avenue and get every little bit of trivia, every fact and factoid, weigh them up against each other and create my own set of knowledge. But with the Beatles, and by extension Paul with his solo career, it's almost infinite. It's almost infinitely dense. It's rather like quantum physics, The more you know, the more you realise that you don't know anything. There are so many Beatle books still that I haven't even begun to read. There's so much about these four lads that is still just speculation in my mind that hasn't been confirmed. There'll be so much that is never going to be confirmed. And, not to get too deep, it's all in the mind, but humanity is this thing that is constantly questioning itself. We're always trying to find the answer to the big question. It's not 42, but it might be the Beatles in that it's never going to be answered. The Beatles ended too soon. They never finished their story. It's this real microcosm of the human condition, really. It's just endless fun. It really is.
Mm. So I just completed 2 episodes related to the Beatles. Which album, if you hadn't brought Tom Waits, would you have brought from the Beatles? What era stands out to you if you had to pick one?
It's probably going to be Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul is the album that I think might inherit the position that Revolver has right now. For the longest time, Sgt. Pepper was undisputably the best Beatle album ever. And now, for like the last sort of 20 years or so, Revolver's been the best Beatle album undisputably. But I'm kind of hoping that there's a small chance, the bookies don't have good odds on it, that Rubber Soul might get the kudos it deserves for not only being their most consistent album, even with the songs that some people consider duds, but it's just such an exciting record. I always like albums where an artist is going through some sort of change, chrysalis into moth or butterfly, blah, 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 blah. And you will see that reflected today in Swordfish Trombones as Waits changes from his jazz, drunken Tin Pan Alley persona that he performed for so many years and moves into his kind of weird American experimental era. But you get that in Rubber Soul, where the Beatles were these little mop tops, and now they're going into stoner Beatles, moving on into psychedelic Beatles. But you get all of that on the one record. It's their whole career, all in one record with some brilliant songs, and it's even got a Ringo writing credit. So you can't argue with it. You really can't.
It's certainly one of my favourite albums. So I'm with you there. I couldn't have articulated it as eloquently as you just did. When I turned 50, I know we just dissed playlists, but I did a 50 for 50 playlist on Spotify. It's still available. I've extended it a little bit. And from Rubber Soul, the track that I chose was called Girl. So I know you'll be familiar with that. How does that track sit with you? Is that one that stands out, or is it one that you skip over and throw away? There's no wrong answer there.
So I'm a terrible guitarist. I hate bar chords. So, the chord of B terrifies me to no end. I'd rather play B minor or B7. But the Beatles have so many songs that are really easy to play, and they're a great band to kind of start off, but they're also one of the worst bands in that Paul and George and John all love weird minor and major chords. They love messing with the formula. But fortunately for me, Girl is oh so easy to play once you put it on like capo 9 or 10, something like that, and it sounds exactly like the record. And I've been playing it to myself since my university dorm room, just going tit 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 to myself. Yeah, I'm absolutely besotted with that song. It's one of Lennon's best, and oh my god, just that intake of breath, that's like one of the most rawly sexual things on a Beatle record. Like, I don't get how that's not up there with like Elvis swinging his hips about. Like, it's raw. It's almost like Wuthering Heights,
I find it
the new film, not the old book.
Well, funnily enough, my wife and I have just been to see the film, so we can recommend that. A little bit steamy, but I'm sure Oscars will be thrown left, right, and centre at that one. But yeah, the song "Girl" is I heard it many, many years ago. I didn't even know it was on Rubber Soul at that point when I first heard it, and I just got absolutely besotted by it myself. Okay, so you've mentioned Jamiroquai. At what point did you start getting out of the house and into the sort of live arena and watching gigs firsthand?
I really haven't. I'm not much of a gig guy. I do suffer from agoraphobia a tad. I'm not good in large outdoor spaces, especially if I can't kind of numb the panicness with a little bit of beer. So gigs can be a little hit and miss for me. I didn't go to a gig on my own until last year when I saw St. Vincent at the Academy here in Birmingham the night before her appearance at the Glastonbury Festival. Another transcendent experience for me. I've always felt very dependent on other people for gigs. Like, shall you and me go see this act that you and me like? And never having the confidence or the bravery, I guess, to kind of risk having a night on my own with no one to blame in case it all goes wrong. I did have a few with my dad. Like, he used to make guitars. He used to make guitars for a band here in the Midlands called Fred Zeppelin, one of the largest Led Zeppelin tribute acts. I remember seeing that. I remember being disappointed that the lead guitarist Midge had forgotten his violin bow, so they couldn't do Dazed and Confused. That trauma sits with me to this day. Other live gigs that kind of stand out. I've seen Bare Naked Ladies a few times here in Birmingham. They haven't announced a new tour this year, which is rather upsetting for me. But yeah, always love them. I've seen Stevie Wonder twice. I'd probably say that Stevie's the best act I've ever seen. Not the last time I saw him. That was okay, but about 10 years ago now, I'd say, he was doing the Songs in the Key of Life tour. And I love a tour where they just do an album. I think like Green Day's done an American Idiot tour, that kind of thing, where you just get to indulge in track listing again. You are at their mercy in that respect. But not only did I get to hear Stevie Wonder in his prime doing all of the Songs in the Key of Life, but the opening acts were Corinne Bailey Rae and Will Ferrell and Nerd. Like, it was an incredible show. It really was. The enduring memory of that gig, though, is Nerd came out and did all of their kind of rap tunes from the mid to early 2000s, like Striptease and stuff. And I was the only person stood up kind of going, yeah! And there's just kind of like all these 50-year-old Londonites kind of sat down quietly. And then Pharrell went into Happy from the Despicable Me film. And I sat down and all the 50-year-olds stood up. You know that classic bit from The Simpsons when Otto is at a gig and is like, sit down, you're ruining it for everyone. Yeah, that is literally how I felt. I would like to see more live shows, though. That is not a New Year's resolution, just more of a life kind of, if I see something, I should go. I remember that Weird Al was here in Birmingham a couple of years ago. I could have gone. I didn't. It keeps me up at night.
So these gigs you've been to, so firstly, let's touch on St. Vincent, Annie Clark. So I've seen her twice.
Oh.
Yeah, the first time I saw St. Vincent, she was playing on a tour with David Byrne from Talking Heads. And that was down in
Oh,
Birmingham. I think it was at the Symphony Hall. That was
nice.
absolutely incredible. They did an album together,
Yeah.
and that whole show was something else because you had David Byrne.
Hmm.
There was obviously the Talking Heads numbers in there, but the songs he was doing with Annie were absolutely fantastic. And then a few years later, she came to Leeds and she just played in a tiny little university hall. And I was down on front row on barrier, and when she locks eyes with you when she's playing, it's very, very difficult to look away. You like it, you feel like she's staring through your soul.
Well, I feel like about Annie, the way I imagine many girls felt about the Beatles in the 60s. I am completely in love with her. Just her ability to kind of blend the visual and the audio together. Not just like the aesthetics, but just like the way she moves on stage, the way she plays, the way she plays with her band. She is the greatest guitarist alive, probably working right now. Certainly the greatest female guitarist going with her signature guitar. It's so spellbinding. And again, a bit of a Waits connection. Annie is a bit of a persona freak herself. Rather unlike Waits, though, she kind of has a new persona per album, which keeps things very fresh. Like, you cannot predict a new St. Vincent set list because it's going to just be all over the place.
It does sound like you've got quite an eclectic taste in music. Where does your record collection take you to?
I mean, we've spoken about Talking Heads already. I would not be able to talk about my love of music or my fear of music without talking about Talking Heads. I mean, what a fucking band. Oh my God. Just that, again, rather like the Beatles, that particular combination of those particular people. Like, is Jerry Harrison the most interesting synth or guitarist player? Not particularly, but when he's in Talking Heads, or when Tina Weymouth or Chris France is in Talking Heads with David totally not on the spectrum Byrne, like, something particularly magic happens. I don't know if you've ever seen the remake of Suspiria that came out a couple of years ago with Tilda Swinton and Dakota Johnson. One of the most fascinating parts of that film was that the way the witches made their spells was through dance. And I I very much felt the same way with music. I feel like the artists definitely just through the way they can move and create sound, especially David Byrne and Talking Heads, the way they can command the vibrations in the air does feel like they're actually putting a spell on me. I do get a physical reaction from Talking Heads, and yeah, they are the only band where I've actually tried to kind of adopt a bit of their zhuzh, as it were, when I do my own live stuff. I'm a terrible open micer, but every time I perform, I'm always trying to channel a bit of David Byrne. You know, go for what's fun, go for what's excites you rather than maybe what the audience is interested in. And I've probably played Psycho Killer on my own on acoustic guitar more than anything. Grace Jones is another milestone for me. I've spoken about her on a podcast before as well. I think she might be one of the most underrated artists of all time. I've just been getting into, of all people, Madonna. I've just heard True Blue the whole way through for the first time, and I'm kind of captivated by it. I grew up with her later stuff. I remember when
Yeah.
Hung Up was one of the biggest things on the radio. Beautiful Stranger from Austin Powers, Ray of Light. I remember all of these songs coming out, and I never kind of like gave her dues, I guess. And I'm now looking at her more as someone that I'd like to study, like Paul McCartney. I mean, I don't know if there are any Madonna podcasts out there that treat her seriously as a musician, not just a fan podcast, but that's something that in about 73 years, when I finally get around to finishing all of Paul's work, that I might like to do, actually.
I remember trying to convince my parents to get me a ticket for her Roundy Park gig in Leeds back in 1987, I think it was.
Wow.
I'm being flatly refused. So That's the closest I would have ever got to see Madonna play. So when did Tom Waits start to infect that musical landscape of yours?
It was the same iPod Nano. It was Rain Dogs. When Rain Dogs opens, just before the opening beat, the first note is played, there's just a tiny little and from that moment I was like, oh, I'm into this. This is weird. This is strange. It makes you feel validated as a strange person. You know, Waits always talks about how the crooked tree is the tree that's never cut down. And as I've gotten older, I've really enjoyed that. I've gotten more bent and gnarled and twisted. Not twisted like, yo, bro, I'm twisted. Just, I've tried, just been myself. And Waits is an incredibly validating artist for anyone who, isn't quite sure who they are. They just think they're a little bit different. And he is the most different, the most strange. And when I was 16, 17, 18, in that early fertile period, having someone weird like this was exactly what I needed. Not only because my two best friends at the time were also heavily into Waits, but also just because it kind of gave me my own identity, as it were. There's no like Tom Waits uniform, as it were, but I was definitely wearing more black. I was definitely wearing more pork pie hats and trilbies and not shaving as much. All very cringe-worthy imagery if you can find my early Facebook photos. But looking back, Waits was definitely an artist who allowed me to kind of not express myself or find myself in those cliche terms, but kind of just come into my own as a bit of an oddball, I guess.
So for some of our listeners who may not be familiar, they may have heard the name Tom Waits. What would be an introductory guide to Tom Waits, the singer?
So you've got Downtown Train, which Rod Stewart sung. You've got Old 55, which the Eagles sung. Those might be two covers you may have got heard before. Anyone who's a Shrek 2 fan will know one of Tom Waits' most obscure songs, Little Drop of Poison. When they go to the villain's pub in the swamp, Captain Hook is playing Little Drop of Poison on the piano in that film, which is absolutely fantastic. Waits is also a very prolific actor. So if you've seen the works of Jim Jarmusch, if you've seen Seven Psychopaths, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, the Coen brothers, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, you have seen Tom Waits. You have heard Tom Waits. But I did not introduce you to the Waits albums that you should introduce people to. Swordfish Trombones is probably the densest and most complicated of the Franks trilogy. Again, I'll get into what that is shortly. But if you want someone to listen to Tom Waits, there's three ones. It's his first album, his debut, Closing Time, which features Old 55 that I mentioned earlier. And that's the only album where he's got a quote-unquote normal voice. It's a bit like Iron Man in the MCU. It's the outlier that kind of started it all. And it's him. He's not doing any of that or anything. It's just him with a kind of smooth voice. And it's very palatable. It's very fun. But it is, for me, his worst album because that's not the part of him that I particularly enjoy. Then you've got Small Change, which is him at the height of his jazz, boozer, Tin Pan Alley persona, him being drunk at the piano, living in the Tropicana Hotel, consorting with drug dealers and hookers, and there's lots of pistols and gangsters abound. It's all that very neo-noir kind of world, but that is all distilled beautifully into that album with many of his most iconic songs. It's also for me an outlier in my fandom because it's an album of all ballads. Like, I'm not a big Paul McCartney ballad guy. I think The Long and Winding Road is one of the very worst Beatles songs ever written. And yet, with Small Change, I can just sit down and listen to Waits ramble on through his boozy breath until the early hours. But the other one is the one that he won Best Alternative Album at the Grammys for in 97. or 96, I believe, which is called Mule Variations, which is kind of the blend of his weird post-apocalyptic Americana phase with a bit more standard rock and roll and blues and piano ballads. If you've not listened to either of those, Jamie, I definitely would recommend Small Change and Mule Variations.
Well, it's fair to say that I have not, and the only Tom Waits that I admitted to telling you that I've heard previously is that Downtown Train track. But you've chosen Swordfish Trombone from 1983. It was his 8th album, and it seems to be a bold, surreal left turn. But full transparency, I've been researching, I've been listening, but I'm by nowhere anywhere near the expert that you are. So what have you thrown me here? Because the first time I put it on, I didn't really know what to make of it. I was like, what have I stepped into here? Is it a record? Is it a theatre show?
Why have I invited this guy onto my podcast? That's what you were thinking, yeah.
Like, and then I'm like thinking, how am I going to promote this episode by using these tracks? I'm fascinated to hear your take, firstly, on why this matters. Why does it matter to you that you wanted to come and talk about it today?
Again, like I said earlier, I like an artist in a state of change and flux. It's so much more exciting than static comfort, you know? And Waits, his original persona, his original character, because he is an artist who is very much aware of the edifice of fame and persona, from the very first interviews he ever gave. Like, you know, people like, where were you born? I was born in the back of a taxi cab. It's like, it's not true. He's just creating this character, this almost like Sergeant Pepper-esque persona for him to kind of be liberated, be free. And in the early part of his career, the truth and the false were blended in together. Reality imitated art and vice versa. He was a drunk. He was living in a hotel. He did probably not bathe as often as he should and had, an unkempt beard and stuff and smoked far too many cigarettes. You can definitely chart Tom Waits' smoking and drinking with the way that his voice gets a little bit like that as his career progresses. But there are so many things that are at a critical turning point. You know, like when people talk about like World War II or World War One, and they'll look at the Somme, the Bulge, Dunkirk, like these very specific battles where history changed forever, or when a certain political party got in, everything was different after that. Where were you when Kennedy got shot? Where were you when Swordfish Trombones was released in 1983? Because this is one of the greatest, best and most shocking shifts in an artist's career ever put to vinyl. Like, he just completely abandons his past character. Like the boldness of that. Like, yeah, you know, Bowie had, Ziggy Stardust and then the Pale White Duke, but no one really gives a shit. No one, it's just David Bowie. David Bowie overpowers the persona, whereas with Waits, the persona overpowers him. There's so little about him that we really know, that all you have is the persona. And so for him to shake up that formula couldn't be more thrilling for me. And rather than say, like, oh, like Dylan, you know, he goes from acoustic folk songster to electric guitar. Okay, that's just a shift in an instrument, really. It's not a major kind of formulaic change. Whereas Waits goes from, I'm going to use the exact phrase again, barroom, barfly, Tin Pan Alley, jazz crooner that's constantly pissed. And he goes to a phase that is quite hard to describe. Like, imagine AI trying to put a genre to Swordfish Trombones. It would start freaking out and just start spouting poorly thought out prompts. There really isn't anything like Swordfish Trombones. There are elements of his old jazz stuff, yes. There's rock, there's blues, but fundamentally it's just experimentation. It's weird, it's different, it's not commercial. It's almost like a running gag that he's trying to waste the the money of Island Records by creating stuff that regular Joe blogs and Jane blogs won't buy. It's fascinatingly complex and mysterious, and the fact that he's really not trying to win me over conventionally is one of the most winning things he can do. This album is fundamentally odd. There's nothing else out there that sounds like it. And on top of that, it's not just strange in one way. He's constantly changing up his strangeness. It's so inventive. The soundscapes, the instrumentation, the different types of sounds you get on this album is constantly engaging. There's no rest stop in this album. Even though there's 3 instrumentals here, even they're engaging. You'd like to think that that's some downtime, but sadly not. This whole album requires constant attention, and if you're up for that, you are going to be rewarded immeasurably.
Can you remember the first time you heard this album? Where were you when you played it front to back for the first time?
You know what? I've been so erudite with so many of my answers previously, and now I'm just having to think for once. I probably would have been in Mrs. Snyer's art class in year 12. That's probably where I would have been painting. I was doing my art module on old war propaganda artwork, so that's probably what I was doing at the time. But I can remember how it made me feel. I mean, from the very first song, Underground, you are transported, whether you like it or not, to this nether realm of excitement and fear in equal measure. It's almost like the whole song's this evocation of like the Morlocks from The Time Traveler, that kind of thing, like this evil underground lair of monsters. And considering that, previously he was like, the piano has been drinking, or like, she gives me blue Valentine. So all these kind of soft crooning stuff. And then just for him to essentially lose his mind and just start barking the kind of ravings that you might get from an insane asylum, it's just fun. It's so great to see Waits cut loose, and he's been no stranger to strangeness or musical oddities or rough vocal deliveries, but with Swordfish Trombones, it's like he's finally committing to the bit. You know what I mean? He's finally just going, yeah, you know what? I'm completely insane, not legally insane, but I am. And so let's just see where this goes.
So I think you've answered my next question around it, which is, I found it incredibly strange at first. That's obviously deliberate. That was on his...
it's not an accident, no.
Yeah. He wanted people to be completely unsettled by this record.
It's scary. It's actually quite scary.
Some of the lyrics in here, they're so dark. And they're like little stories, aren't they? Little narratives. There's poetry in there, but there's definitely this really dark undertone. So if you listen to this in year 12, and this is something that's resonating with you at that point in time, was it that sort of experimental soundscape? Was it the voice? What was it that you picked up on that you were like, I feel like I'm home here?
I think it's the singularity or the singleness of it. It's so him. No one else is doing it. He's manipulating his voice. He's finding strange instruments. He's finding unique musicians to play on this album. He's got very strange influences, like you've got Captain Beefheart, Kurt Weill, and Harry Parch all thrown in there just to create this hodgepodge of Americana, world music, experimental, and I've always enjoyed dark stuff. I've always enjoyed, dark humor, dark movies, that kind of thing. And just to have someone kind of revel in it in a musical sense, like it's almost akin to the way Tarantino revels in violence, or the way that Hitchcock revels in keeping the audience in suspense. It's just, I don't know a lot about music, but when I see a master of his craft, I can see a master of his craft. And that is Waits on this album.
I've been listening to it, as I say, for a couple of days since you introduced me to this. So I'm interested to just do a skirt over some of the tracks in there. The one that sticks out for me on the first 3 or 4 listens is a track called "In the Neighborhood."
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it.
What's the background to that?
So, like, Waits is a guy who, throughout his career, has always been a man who is fixated on geography and location and the specificity of place and how that affects people, you know, where you're from, how that affects your psyche, that kind of thing. You know, I mean, on this album alone, I believe we have 26 different places mentioned in the lyrics. But In the Neighborhood eschews all of that. And instead, he creates this quasi-national anthem for weird hometown anywhere. Like, all the characters simultaneously sound completely fantastical and oddball, like the kind of circus freaks you see on the front cover of the album with him. Very Todd Browning-esque imagery. But then he mixes it in with like, but we don't get our butter delivered no more. Or like the garbage pail trucks keep you up at night. It's this wonderful, weird mixture of very wholesome imagery and very dark imagery at the same time, the regularness of life and the strangeness of life all together in one song. And also, very rarely, it's a Tom Waits song with a music video, so it's also important in that sense.
So you've walked with this album for a number of years now. Are there any tracks that have kind of changed shape for you over the years?
You know what? The second track, Shore Leave, I remember thinking, yeah, it was quite good back in the day. Now, for me, it is the undisputed masterpiece of the album. It's almost like one of those BBC audio play productions, just with the amount of like sound effects going on in it. And it's a mixture of that with spoken word poetry, but then he has like a song chorus in it as well, which is incredibly haunting and beautiful. The lyricism in it is very Frank's trilogy. I mean, so much of music is moments, just these little fleeting passing specks of time that stick with you forever. And sometimes it's a sound, like you on this track you get that marimba line, the glung 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 glung. If that doesn't haunt your dreams forever, then I don't know what does. Like it's just so hypnotic. And then the guitar on it, it's so discordant and jangly, and clearly Waits has been fucking with the levels and making sure things aren't plugged in properly or getting enough power, just creating these unique and dynamic sounds, very much like the Beatles being like, hey, George Martin, can you just make this sound different for the sake of it sounding different? Like, Waits does that, and I really enjoy that in an artist. But then, just like the image of him saying, I wonder how this moon here in Chinatown could look down in Illinois and find you there. I said, babe, and like he just goes to sing, you know, how much he misses his baby in a very kind of standard songwriting sense. It's a very kind of standard chorus mixed in with this very dark, weird spoken word piece with this strange experimental instrumentation. Like I do try to empathize with people a lot with music. Like, oh, I get why someone might like that. I get why someone would be interested in that, even if I'm not. But with Shore Leave, if you don't like this song, I might struggle to connect with you as a human being on a fundamental level.
One of the other tracks that I liked was Frank's Wild Years. But I wanted to talk about the actual title track. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? You'd think that, oh, he created the world's first Tom Waits podcast. He must know everything. But that's not the case, folks. I mean, I'm still learning stuff about Paul even to this day. And only in the research for this episode did I come across a piece that mentioned how this is a song about PTSD. He came home from the war with a party in his head. Oh my gosh, this is a song about a soldier like coming back from, maybe Vietnam. It's 1983. The timeline, it might not line up exactly, but it's got a bit of a Lieutenant Dan feel to it. And then considering on the album you also have a track called Soldiers Things as well, it definitely beefs up that theory. The track itself, it's so hypnotic. It's just another example of Waits doing that kind of music poetry thing. Like, you mentioned Frank's Wild Years. That's, he has a lot of albums where this is my spoken word track, and it's very obvious, whether it's Diamonds on My Windshields or Step Right Up, something like that. Whereas here, it's definitely a lot more melodic, a lot more thought out. There's definitely more stuff to enjoy than just the vocal. And it might be the ultimate distillation of those two parts of his songwriting, actually.
Is this an album that is going to reward patience? Is beauty going to shine through, or is every listen going to be clouded by the deliberate misdirection and chaos that Waits is doing on this album?
I mean, you will come to track 4, Johnsburg, Illinois, and you will know that no matter what exterior he is projecting onto the audience, his real motives and his real feelings are laid bare on that track. I mean, I've never ceased to be fascinated by how much emotion and genuine, earnest emotion, it's not sarcastic, it's not ironic, and he packs it in all under 2 minutes. Like, he's mostly known for these longer, more winding tracks, and whilst he does use shorter songs, it's always for effect more than running out of ideas or just jamming for too long. And so for him to create this exaltation of love for his new partner, his new wife, Kathleen Brennan, and choose to have it only be under 2 minutes rather than say, Maybe I'm Amazed or Silly Love Songs for Linda, one of these great long love songs. I feel like it's a much more powerful statement. Brevity is the soul of wit, as a certain bard once said. And through his very sparse, very economical use of words and phrasing here, he tells us more about Kathleen and his relationship with Kathleen than any autobiography ever could. And just as an aside, the phrase, she grew up on a farm there's a space on my arm where I've written her name next to mine, might be my single favourite rhyming couplet, not only of Waits's catalogue, but of all time.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. I can listen to some albums from the early 80s, and I know that they're from the early 80s. When I was listening to this first time round, I was surprised, actually, that this was early 80s. I couldn't put a date on it. I guess some albums do feel timeless. Is that how you see this? Or when you listen to it, do you go, well, no, actually, it takes me right back to 83?
Yeah, 83, yes, but 1883 more than anything. Waits has definitely preferred to live in that. I mean, Americana itself lends itself more to a timeless quality. Just talking about America means you're going to span everything from Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, to Sabrina Carpenter. And Waits definitely plays within that realm. Playing off the stereotypes, playing off the different sounds of the era. He does one song on the album Frank's Wild Years called Innocent When You Dream, and he does it twice. And the second time he does it is called Innocent When You Dream 78. And it's produced in such a way that it sounds like a 78 record from like the 1910s. So Waits is very much not concerned with sounding modern at all. And all of his great influences also come from the 20s, the 1910s, the 1930s. And so it makes a lot of sense that he's trying to bring all of that in. And then there's also probably a producer on the other side or a record label owner saying, you've at least got to have an electric guitar on it, Tom, and a set of drums. And so, there's a nice little back and forth between him and conventional music, I guess, is the way to put it.
Mm. We've talked about this album being bold and being a surreal left turn when he put it out there in 1983. He's got an extensive back catalogue. Do any of his other albums since this land with similar impact, or is this one that just stands out completely as an outlier?
Oh no, oh definitely not. I mean, you've got the rest of the trilogy. You've got Rain Dogs, which is absolutely phenomenal. Frank's Wild Years, which I think is an underrated classic. You've got his two albums that were based on plays that were both released on the same day. Alice and Blood Money, two phenomenal records. Alice might be his best. It might be his best. It's even less palatable than this album, though. Obviously, you've got Mule Variations, which is his most commercial record. It won the Grammy for Best Alternative in 96 or 7, like I say. But you've got the predecessor to that, its own Swordfish Trombones, called Bone Machine, which is Waits essentially trying to bring about the end of all existence through music. It's terrifying. It's darker than this. You know how like you'll talk about Night of the Hunter from like the 1950s, like, oh yeah, that was a dark film, or Psycho was a dark film, but then you have to compare that to American Psycho or something more modern, and obviously everything keeps stepping up, and Waits does keep stepping it up. Or you can move even further into the future, like 2004 with his album Real Gone, where like Waits does like beatboxing with his deep dark voice along with his dark electric and blues influences. You've even got his triple parter Orphans, subtitled Brawlers, Ballers and Bastards, which is a wonderful collection, rather like his anthology of all things that he didn't release over the years. And unlike many unreleased collections, it contains material better than the stuff he did release. Rather like Paul McCartney, one might say. Yeah, the discography does not stop with Swordfish Trombones whatsoever. It's only just starting. I haven't mentioned her yet, Kathleen Brennan, his new wife. A lot of people like to break Waits down into like 3 distinct periods, like his early jazz period, this kind of middle, mostly strange experimental period, and then his later super dark, like elder statesman, Kerouac, Kubrick, weirdo. But for me, I prefer to break it down to pre-Kathleen Brennan and post-Kathleen Brennan. And whilst Kathleen was present for some of the recording for Heart Attack and Vine, she wasn't there for the writing of it. And so with Swordfish Trombones, you get the first album where Waits has not only more structure and stability and rigidity in his life, but he also has a loving, supporting, artistic partner as well. Several people have pointed out that Kathleen is essentially Waits' own Linda, his own Yoko, as it were, who kind of pushes him to the next level. And you'd think a partner might be a more stabilizing influence on someone, but fortunately for us, Kathleen only seems to encourage Tom Waits to be weirder and stranger and more crooked, and Swordfish Trombones is a testament to that. And thank God she did arrive, because his career only gets better from here.
We can't talk about this album without touching on the artwork. Instantly recognizable. It looks theatrical. It's stark, strange, photographic. What are your thoughts? What were your first reaction to it? So you heard the music first, and then you would have seen the album art. What do you draw from that?
So it was a photograph taken by Michael A. Russ with Waits hanging out with a couple of quite literal circus freaks. And so one can only be reminded of Todd Browning's, like 1936 or 42 or something like that. It's a really old film, literally called Freaks. And Waits' career from this point onwards will be replete with imagery of the crippled, the deformed, the malformed, the strange. And it's not in any kind of exploitative way. It is just him having this fascination with anyone who is different or abnormal, as it were. I shot billiards with a midget over a Singapore sling. He can't help it. Tom Waits having a lyric about a midget is almost a stereotype at this point, because he just goes back to it so often. He loves anyone that's not quote unquote conventionally normal by society standards, rather like him. And I think that works entirely for him. This album cover evokes that perfectly. It's so strange. I love how the contrast on the image has clearly been turned to 11, almost like Waits was over some sort of console and just cranked some dial. It's basically a black and white image with a little smatter of yellow and pink on there. It's a very stark image. It's very stylized. It's intended to look strange and interesting and eye-catching. And I guess you're just meant to look at it and go, what's this? I mean, that is an element of album artwork that doesn't exist anymore, I'm afraid. The idea of, if you put something weird on your album cover, someone might pick it up, and picking up the album cover is the step in between someone buying it and not buying it. And so, yeah, this album artwork definitely works to make me pick it up and go, what is that? What? And then, boom, you probably suck it in by that point.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to the music first before I looked at what the artwork looked like. And when I look at it, it kind of informs you a little bit as to what's inside.
Mm-hmm.
Some album covers you can get, they can be quite vanilla, can't they? And they don't really tell you either way what you can expect. But when I looked at it, I was like thinking, yeah, he's been very clever here. I think it's an incredibly fitting photograph to put on this collection of songs.
It almost evokes that timelessness as well. Like, this image could have been taken yesterday or in 1842. It's like when you go through like an old library document or some microfiche or something like that. He's like, what is this image? Where has this come from? When was this taken? It's so enigmatic in that way. You want to know who this guy is. Why is he hanging out with these two particular people? What is the story being told here? I was actually confused. I thought that this was taken directly from the music video for In the Neighborhood, but it turns out this was a separate photo shoot, and the video for In the Neighborhood kind of took visual inspiration from it, like in the way that the Hello Goodbye music video looks a bit like the Sgt. Pepper cover. You know what I mean?
So as we close out this bit of the podcast, is there any final sort of thoughts you want to throw out to the listener to cement some of your enthusiastic conversation around this album? A final gambit of go out and listen to it.
If you're cool, you'll listen to it. No, this album, folks, it's rather a lot like life. You get out of it what you put into it. If you're willing to take a risk and try something a little bit strange, you are going to be rewarded with something you've never heard before. And so just check it out. Just if you've got an ounce of curiosity at all and you want to listen to someone who doesn't sound like anyone out there on the charts currently or previously, if you want to hear a very singular voice, a very singular vision that taps into not only his own personal psyche, but the general kind of Americana zeitgeist of the time, as well as rather a lot of world music influences as well. There's a lot of Australia on this album. We get a little bit of Scotland on this album as well. Then, you know what? Go check it out.
Thank you for that. Let's just touch on your Paul or Nothing podcast. And for anyone who hasn't encountered it yet, yes, it focuses on Paul McCartney, but it's so much more than just biography. It's storytelling, it's cultural exploration, conversations with authors, musicians, and creators. I've had a listen to a couple of episodes, and I'm learning as I do. Your love of kind of deep musical research really comes through on this podcast. How did it start? Was it fully formed idea, or was it just, let's try one of these kind of experiments?
So you know how Lennon and McCartney made each other better through friendly competition? When me and my friend Tom did Down in the Hole, we didn't have a joint script for an episode. We would both write our own individual notes and scripts and then just kind of have a conversation. And so there was this real battle of like who can get the quote out first, who can get this cool piece of trivia out first. And that very much started my desire to find the best, the most unique, the most eye-catching, the most hooky kind of information about an artist to, well, just talk about them. But then on top of that, I don't think I've ever moved past the university essay writing phase of my life. If you check out any one of my scripts, you can support me on Patreon and read them yourself. You will see that all of my scripts are fully worded. Very little of my show is riffed out unless I say beforehand. It is scripted. I do several takes. There are different edits of each episode, rather like the Beatles anthology. Like, oh, there's the edit from October. There's the edit from late October. That kind of thing. And it is a very curated experience that I do try and specifically craft, as it were. And that's something I've been working towards for the last few years. I mean, I'm nearly at the end of Paul's career now. I'm just about to talk about Memory Almost Full, and then after that, there's only a few albums left. But I'm very dissatisfied with the first half of my podcasting career. So I think when I get to the end of Paul or Nothing, I'm probably going to redo all of them and rewrite them to the standard that I write them today. But yeah, I've always just had this style that I enjoy writing in, which is the university style of, sources, quotes. It's the exact same process. I'll go out there, I'll read all the articles you can get for free online, then I'll read all the articles that I've borrowed online through friends' library cards or Google accounts, that kind of thing. Then I'll read all the stuff that I can bootleg. Then it's all the stuff that I can physically get in the library. Do you remember libraries, folks? You can still get a lot of stuff on in those as well. And all of that together comes to make scripts that I'm very proud of, but do not benefit a regular upload schedule. So I do have to balance kind of like, writing a Flowers in the Dirt episode over 6 months whilst I put out weekly, bi-weekly, kind of more regular content,
You've had so many guests on your podcast, authors, journalists, fellow obsessives digging into the albums and overlooked eras. Any guests or episodes that really resonated and stayed with you? Or is that trying to pick one of your favourite children?
You're just going to make me end up severing connections. And no, most of my favourite episodes are ones where I just get to cut loose and just talk to people off script, as it were. Like, yes, there is a script there, but the conversation flows rather naturally. So there's a guy I have on called Dylan Seavey. We talk about all of Paul's live albums together. Those are some of my favourites. Phoebe from Another Kind of Mind, another brilliant Beatles podcast. Whenever we get together, we are just we are a house on fire, mostly of inappropriateness. I've recently done an episode with the founder of the Queer Museum here in the UK in London, and the amount of irreverence and naughtiness we got up to on that episode was particularly exciting for me. But then also, I've spoken to Lawrence Juba and Denny Sywell of Wings. That was very important for me as well. And Alec Baldwin followed me on Instagram yesterday, so that was quite exciting as well.
Unbelievable. Fantastic. If you I mean, I'm assuming that you've not had chance to interview Paul McCartney. Have you ever met him? Is he aware of your podcast?
So I have exchanged a few emails with his current publisher. There are a few members of his previous staff who I am in contact with, allegedly, but not confirmed. So I've got a few insights there. But what I like about MPL is that they must 100% be aware that I am using Paul McCartney's music in my episodes in full in a non-transformative way, and they've not sent me a cease and desist. Now, is that because each episode at the end of the day only gets a couple of thousand views? Maybe, but also I think they must know in their heart of hearts that I'm not doing any harm. I'm only promoting Paul. You have to roll with the punches to a certain degree. I love Paul. I love everything he does. I'm an apologist through and through. And if I ever did get to meet him, I wouldn't be so stupid as to use it for content for the podcast. I would just, I'd like to chat with him 10 minutes in private, maybe have a lunch, dinner date or something like that, have it be unrecorded, and then just kind of keep that for myself,
No, that's fair enough. I saw Paul play Glastonbury. I'm trying to think whether it was 2004 or 2005.
It was the first Glastonbury show, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the only time I've seen a Beatle, and he was absolutely phenomenal. But have you seen him play?
Yeah, I saw him on the Out There tour in 2016, 2017, I imagine. And I saw it with the guy who I did the Tom Waits podcast with. And I went in quite cynically because I've listened to hundreds of live shows of Paul, like anything that's on YouTube. I've listened to it in full. I've heard Maybe I'm Amazed thousands of times. I've heard Here Today thousands of times. And so I was going in thinking, I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to go wow when the big fireballs with Live and Let Die go up. And I was wrong on all three counts. I was screaming like I was at Shea Stadium or Budokan. I was crying whenever he sung Here Today or Let It Be or Hey Jude. And when the fireball came out for Live and Let Die, I just went, wow. Wow. I was so spellbound. Paul has this real ability to kind of allow you to let your guard down and expose your inner dorky, loser, lame fan, which is your real inner persona. You can get in contact with your id, as Freud would say.
So, Sam, we always close Friday Vinyl Club with a Friday spin, a recommendation that you give to our listeners, something that could be old, it could be new. What's dominating your headphones or speakers at the moment? What have you got for us?
Now, when I knew that this was going to be coming, I thought, right, I've really got to plug an album that I've always felt a strong affinity to. In 2009, on the Sony Music record label, a little band from here in the UK called Kasabian released West Rider Pauper Lunatic Asylum, and it is easily one of the greatest albums ever conceived. The confidence and the inspiration on this album is near unparalleled from the time. It's like a real zenith of the kind of experimental indie scene of that time. Kasabian was always getting weirder and more Beatle-esque as they were getting on in their career. But this is their kind of commercial highlight and their artistic highlight. It's a bit of a pepper for me, which is ironic considering that their next album, Velociraptor, which has a black and white cover, was called their Revolver, which to me sounded like them admitting they were taking a step backwards. I don't know if anyone in their media ever kind of mentioned that to them, but that's how I felt. But on West Rider Pauper Lunatic Asylum, you get such great singles as Underdog, Fire, Vlad the Impaler, Fast Fuse, Swarfiga. There's just so much here, and it's just in my mind forever. I listened to this at university on near non-stop, and a very important girl in my life, especially at the time, bought it me on vinyl, and I'm forever in her debt for doing so. But what I enjoy most about this vinyl is that it's not a 7-inch, it's not a 12-inch, it's two 9-inch discs. It's two kind of large EPs presented as one album. I've never seen anything like it before. So yeah, West Rider, Pauper, Lunatic Asylum, the kind of peak of the late 2000s indie rock scene, all distilled into one near perfect album.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Sam, thank you so much for joining us on Friday Vinyl Club. Did you enjoy that?
This has been an absolute blast. I look for any and all opportunities to discuss the music that I love with people that I think are interesting. So this is a wonderful way for me to kill two birds with one stone. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful diving into the world of Tom Waits and exploring the depth and craft of your podcast, Paul or Nothing. To our listeners, you'll find links to Sam's work in our show notes. If you haven't already, give Paul or Nothing a listen. It's one of the most insightful and entertaining explorations of musical legend you'll find. We'll add some of the tracks we've discussed today into our Friday Vinyl Club Spotify playlist. You can reach us at any time on Instagram at JamieB1973 or email thefridayvinylclub@hotmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it, follow the show, leave a rating. It really helps us grow and more people find us. Until next time, this has been the Friday Vinyl Club. Keep your records spinning and your stories alive. Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Take care, Jamie. I'll see you next time. Yeah. Bye.
I love you, Paul McCartney. I love you, Paul McCartney.
Before I go, so yeah, Paul McCartney. So the way you do is you just kind of have to scratch your nose a bit, and then kind of. Fortunately, Paul sounds quite brummy. He sounds like he's from Birmingham a little bit, so it really helps with the impression.
I think if he's heard your impression, Sam, that's why he's not contacted you. See you later. Bye.